I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 242 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. Okay, my friends, let me tell you a little bit about what my morning looked like today. So as I'm recording this, we are hitting the very end of the school year. And I woke up and I was getting ready to go for a walk, and I was thinking, my mind was like racing already with just like a partial list of things that were undone that needed to be done. I was thinking about camp registrations, and do we have sunscreen that is not out of date, and end of year teacher gifts. And we have one final project that has to get finished with one of my kids. And I was thinking about, where am I in our summer vacation travel plans? I know I've booked the plane tickets, I've booked the place. What do I not have secured that if I don't handle soon, we might not be able to get? Oh yeah, those sports physicals. They said we should probably schedule those early in the summer so that we don't get boxed out of being able to get the appointment. And then that led to are the cats up to date on their shots? And is there anything we need to do with the dog? And I wanted to open a bank account for my soon-to-be 15-year-old so he can learn to manage that. And then that somehow led to physical therapy appointments for my youngest. And are we making sure we're helping her enough in between her appointments? And by the way, do we have propane for the grill? And are we getting mulch delivered? And it just kind of went on and on and on. And I hope you're laughing at me as you listen to that. And I bet you have your own list that sounds a lot like that, that's running through your mind, even as you're listening to this episode. It is no wonder that we sometimes feel a little muddled, right? And that list that I was just rattling through is part of what we could describe as the mental load of motherhood, right? The sort of cognitive burden where all of these tasks and decisions and choices and reminders are sort of floating around in our mind all the time. They're running in the background, this list of tasks that could be done or should be done. And that is why I think so many of the women that I work with within Brilliant Balance, or just women that I know in my life, feel this sort of chronic sense of unease. It's no wonder we can't find our keys or our sunglasses when we need them, because that mental burden is real. And this has circulated now for a few years. I think we started giving a name to this phenomenon. I went back and read an article, it was a paper, actually, an academic paper that Allison Daminger wrote in the American Sociological Review. And I find this particular lens on it to be really insightful. And so I'm going to share her 4 main points with you today. She describes it as cognitive labor. Right? In sociological terms, this mental load of motherhood is cognitive labor, meaning we're not really doing anything. We're just thinking all the time. We're carrying around this list of decisions and reminders and things we need to do or have done in our heads. And that is as taxing as just going out and doing the work itself. So in any of the litany that I gave you this morning, you could assign these 4 sort of phases of the cognitive labor to those tasks. And then what I want to talk about today is, what are those? How do we get some help with them? And what are sort of the categories that we might want to consider in our own households, in our own lives, where we would like to offload some of this mental burden? Because I think there's a number of things maybe getting in our way from being willing or able to offload it. I think we lament it a lot. We complain about it a lot. But I know, at least in my own life, I have some resistance to handing off some of this. And I want to talk a little bit about why. So back to Allison Daminger's work. What she listed were these 4 phases, essentially. She broke down this mental load into 4 components. So they are anticipate, identify, decide, and monitor. So let's use one example. Let's use an example of summer camp, right? If I'm saying okay, do I have camp registrations handled? What is the anticipate phase of that? Anticipate is realizing we need to start thinking about options for summer camp before they're all filled up. So this work for us happens back, for if you're really on your A game, it happens like in February or March. And then there's sort of this middle ground. And then there's people who, as summer is now almost upon us, thinking, okay, I gotta get these kids in somewhere. I have to get them signed up for things. But that anticipation is the realization that we need to start thinking about options, right? We sort of sense that it's coming, it's getting onto our radar. In the camp example, the identify work is what? It's looking into what are the types of camps that would meet our family's needs. So there's kind of this research phase, right? Identify is essentially a research phase. So we're getting online, we're picking up those little flyers at the grocery store that are like, here's a listing of all the camps in your area. We're on social media, we're talking to friends, we're in this information gathering phase where we're trying to identify options to satisfy this particular need, in this case, summer camp, right? And like, just think about how much time we spend on something like that, comparing them and contrasting them. Deciding can be a relatively short piece of work, but there's sometimes a lot of emotional burden of carrying the weight of that decision. So deciding is where we choose the camp, right? We choose which camp, which week, which session. And then with this little teeny thing that's not cognitive burden, which is where we actually sign them up. And that's, here's a form that needs to be filled out online and the payment needs to be made. That's pretty quick. And then we get into monitor. And the monitor phase, the cognitive load of this, is making sure that all the pieces and parts of making that camp experience happen are in place. Have their medical forms been sent in? Do we have their clothes that they're taking labeled with their name as required? Do they have the water bottle? Do they have the right kind of shoes? All of the things that we're sort of monitoring throughout the process to make sure that it goes smoothly, that has a cognitive load as well. So if you think about that whole camp example, anticipate, identify, options, right? Decide which one. There's this little teeny part of sign the kid up for camp, which takes about 10 seconds. And then there's monitoring all of the other pieces of reading forms and exchanging emails with counselors and making sure that it goes smoothly. So what happens when we say, oh my gosh, somebody has to help me with all of this, right? There's like 50 million things I have to do, is often someone in our household will step up to help with the execute part. That's the part where help gets offered is, hey, I'll fill out the form to register for camp, right? Or I'll go pick up the form from the doctor for the medications. That is not the biggest part. That's not the part that most of us are yearning to offload. So in order to offload this mental load of motherhood, this cognitive burden, the key is to think through all of the categories of thinking work that needs to be done, sort of like in a vertical work stream, right? From anticipate, through identify, through decide, through monitor, all of the pieces and parts in that vertical work stream, and divide those entire streams of work among the adults in the household, right? It can't be piecemeal, or what will happen is we're only offloading these tactical executional pieces, not the cognitive burden, which is what's driving us crazy. So this practice is, I don't think this is widely done. I don't think this is easy. And I really don't think it's widely adopted. I think we have typically somebody managing virtually all of the cognitive load and mental load. And then we have sort of the assistant model by which someone else is helping with executing small pieces and parts. So if you are kind of buried under the weight of that system in your household, if you're carrying that mental load, then the first thing maybe to do is get a list of all of the categories of work that could be turned into these vertical streams. Okay, so I wrote down a couple. Let me talk through some of these just to get your creative juices flowing, but you may have different ones in your household than I have in mine. And I'm going to name some here that I don't even necessarily have in my household. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. So one of them would be food, right? I mean, if I know meal planning is just the bane of so many people's existence. So let's just take food. Everyone in this house needs to eat. So someone could say, hey, I'll run to the grocery store. What do you need? Right? What do we need? Okay, that is the execute piece of the puzzle. The mental load is, do you have kind of a mental inventory of what is usually in stock in this house? In the pantry, in the refrigerator, in the freezer? Do you sort of know what full looks like? Do you understand the nutrition needs, the varying nutrition needs of people, the various people in the household, such that the food that is on hand and in inventory meets those nutritional needs, right? Not just like, what is it fun, but do we actually have things that create balance for the humans who live in this household? There is the work of meal planning, of deciding what to the extent that we're going to actually sit down and eat meals, what is going to be on the table, and is that food in the house such that when we're ready to cook it, it's ready. There's the shopping, which involves making a list, checking that inventory, making the list of all the items, knowing, by the way, the brand preferences of the various people in the household, such that, if your son will only eat this particular brand of, mustard, that's the one that comes into the house, that it's not just, this is why making a grocery list for someone else to go can be so tricky, because you want to say it has to be this size and it has to be this brand, and those preferences are all part of the mental load. There's the cooking, which involves having the skill and do we have the equipment? And then there's all the execution work of making these meals and cleaning up from them, right? And then the cycle just is never ending because we're back in inventory management. So if you look at the food process in your household, which sounds very nerdy as I say it that way, but if you look at the food process end to end, look at how much of that is cognitive. How much of that is nobody's touching any food, or buying any food or eating any food or cleaning up the food. There's all of this sort of swirl that's happening in our minds. Do we have food? When do we need to go to the store? What are we? Are we trying to change the way somebody eats? Are we trying to eat the same things? Like that entire process could be handed to one adult in the household who manages it end to end, right? Another one is like the transportation related needs, all of the things about the vehicles in your household. Which ones do we own? Do we buy them or lease them? What's the budget that we have for them? Are they being maintained and repaired? Are they clean? Do they have fuel in them? Do they need to be replaced? When is the right time to replace them? Who has access to driving? All of the things, right? There's a lot of mental and cognitive work around transportation other than just the execution of, I will get the car washed, I will put fuel in the car, I will go and physically buy the car. Think about buying a car and how it relates to the camp example, right? So many steps that are cognitive in deciding when and which brands and bazillion things. We probably have to buy a car soon, so this one is on my mind. And it's just an overwhelming cognitive burden. I just wrapped up vacation planning. Vacation planning is another one that there are so many steps that are mental, around where are we going to go and when and how does that fit the calendar and what are the options of places to stay and how will we get there and what will we do while we're there and does everyone have what they need in order to go have this experience in terms of clothing and, items that they might need to take with them. So much of that is cognitive before it's executed. You can think about healthcare for your family in this realm. You can think about school for your family in this realm. Everything from all the pieces and parts, choosing a school, teacher communication, all the online portals, the homework reminders, the support with doing the homework, managing grades, like, do we need any interventions or is everything going well? Supporting them as they do projects, the filling out of all the forms, teacher gifts, volunteering, and then just thinking through, is everything going well? Do we need to make any changes? That's part of the cognitive burden. You can look at kids' activities through this lens, any sport or arts-related activity. You can look at the overall money management in your household, from budgeting to savings to investing. You can look at leisure time, how you spend your leisure time as a family. So my idea for you in this episode is, first of all, to recognize and really honor that part of why you might be screaming inside that you need some help is because it's not just the tasks. Like, you're looking at the tasks on your calendar going, none of this takes that much time. And the execution tasks don't. But the cognitive load, the mental load of it does. And so if you're kind of screaming inside that you could use some help, I want you to challenge yourself to not just get help with the execution, but to really look at, is there one or more of these vertical streams that could change ownership from you to another adult in your household? Okay. And there is some upfront work here. There's definitely some upfront work, kind of like if you were going to train someone at your office to take on a job that you've always done, there would be some upfront work in getting them equipped, getting them trained in how you do it. But once they've been trained and you can really step back, it's worth it. So I mentioned at the beginning that there's one part of this that's hard for me when I think about handing off an entire vertical work stream. And the part that's hard is delegating the results as well, releasing the results, the outcome. Because if we say, I'm going to release this entire vertical stream, it's yours now, thank you, I'm just delighted to be rid of it, even for just one season, you take it. And then you chronically check in to make sure the results are to your standard, and you chronically check in to see if they're doing it on the timing that you would have done it. And, did they remember to think about this one option that you would have thought about? You will lose all of the power of this, right? So upfront, learning to delegate or to hand off and then release the process and the results by which this gets accomplished, right? You're really just attached to the outcome, because everyone needs the opportunity to do this in their own way. And so that's, I think, often what's really underneath our resistance to hand it off. We know there's tension. We know it's not sustainable to do all of it, but releasing the control, giving up the power that we have over the standard or the result, that is maybe kind of the final frontier, the hardest part of getting some relief here. So I'm just acknowledging that in most households, there's one person who carries much of this mental load. In many, many households, it's the mother, and that's why I'm using that language in this episode. I do know households where it's not, right? Where that is inverted. But in many households, it is. Much of the research that's been done on this academically kind of backs that up. And so if you want to experiment with getting some freedom, with sharing that mental load, what it's going to take is looking at these vertical work streams, the anticipate, identify, decide, and monitor work that's associated with all of those categories: food, transportation, cleaning, healthcare, school, vehicles, activities, etc. And when you're thinking about the dividing line, dividing the entire thing, right? So that one person has it sort of soup to nuts and they can manage the entire work stream. The mental load of motherhood is real. It's real and it is heavy. So any relief from it is a welcome reprieve, and it's something that I want you to play with and see how your experiments go. And, your early experiments may not be perfect. You may have to try this a few times before it really clicks into place, but think about the benefits of that. Think about how powerful it would be to really hand off some of these areas entirely and be able to repurpose that time and energy for other things. I want that for you. All right, that is all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.